Well, I may be up for another playthrough of that game at some point in the future, especially after some of those little niggly patching things get done. Can always make more daughters, exactly. Hey, and yeah, what's her name? I don't even remember her name. Is still alive. Off wind or some whatever she's called. I don't know. Alette was pretty good though. But yeah, I may be up for another playthrough of this at some point in the future once the patch is through, just to see what some other options would be. Now that I understand the mechanics better, maybe try it at even the higher difficulty level, since we kind of got our asses kicked already. So why not get our asses kicked more? I'm just gonna let the credits run here. And yeah, let's maybe reflect a little bit about that story. The story is obviously unresolved. One of the interesting things about this game, I guess they're planning on doing further additions, because the game clearly the story's not over. There's a lot of unresolved stuff right now. There's this giant serpent thing which we've only just been introduced to. We were already told that Bellower is not actually dead. He's thinks that he's dead or something like that, but he's not actually dead. I'm really curious to see if you carry into the next game whether you keep your party, whether you keep what level people in your party are. We have a lot of people at max level already, so I wonder, are they going to still have character progression, or is everybody going to reset? Do you keep people alive who are alive and people who are dead? I imagine that'll be part of importing into the next part of the Banner Saga. A lot of loose ends left. There's a lot of loose ends left. We left the Hakon story a while back with Grofheim being destroyed, and then we played Rook for a really long time before Hakon showed up at the end, but there wasn't a lot about what happened to Rook, or what happened to Hakon and Moger and his party in between before he joined up with you. And then I wonder whether they'll stay together with Rook into the next game. Rook is turns out Rook is the protagonist, even though you don't start off the game as him. You start off with Ubin and then with Hakon as kind of your main person. I wonder if the next game is going to be a single protagonist, or if you're going to have Hakon still. There's a lot with Ludin, who's this prince of men who we haven't really heard about. Let's see, with all the mythos about banners, I wish there was some sort of banner recorded for each individual game that also maybe clued you into where branches are in the story. So that, yeah, that's cool. I like that idea. So that on future playthroughs, you know where to change your actions to see different developments. Yeah, that's true. And yeah, we never charged the gates at that one town, so we never got into that town. And it seemed like they wanted us to, settle in for the long haul there, but I wonder if you can break into that town. I wonder if you accept only one of the two guys who end up fighting each other, or neither of them. If you get betrayed, probably not. I wonder if it actually makes a difference if you keep people alive. Like, we saw all of our clansmen basically left by the end anyway, so does it really matter to keep them alive? Should we just use all of our renown on leveling up people and buying items and stuff? I also bought a lot of items early on with one of those parties, which I think was a mistake. In retrospect, it seems like renown is too valuable to be spending on items, even if they are good items, because you end up having more items than you can assign anyway. So unless there's an item that's really perfect, I think items like the +3 strength item was really, really useful. We would never have been able to finish that final battle without that item that gave +3 shield damage to Rook. Like, that was key. Both in the fight, the fight to get Bellower to become mortal, and in the fight afterwards, after Alette was dead, because Rook was the only person who could attack him without drawing aggro directly afterwards. So interesting tactical decisions there. So there's these trade-offs that you make, but I wonder how much they really are trade-offs. It feels like there is a kind of super optimized way to play that I was not playing in this case. But then again, there are a lot of tricky decisions where you really are deciding between like a party member living or dying. Like, we lost a party member on the first day. from Hakon's party, who was already level 5. He was the first person I got to level 5, and then I lost him in a random event. So, had I not lost that, maybe some of my other battles would have gone better, because he was really, really good already. Then again, you don't want your level 5 people to get all the kills, because then you can't level up other people. Man, that's a lot of backers they had. Really interesting decision making that it puts in your way. I wrote on my blog after the last playthrough on Tuesday, I feel like there's the illusion of choice more than there's actual choice here. There's a lot of choices within the story, but the story itself is, I think, fairly on rails. Like, you can really only end up getting to this, city Sighorn or whatever and fighting, Boars, whatever it's called, and fighting Bellower at the end of this one. That said, how do you make a story more flexible? I think that's an open question, and I'm not sure that there's a good answer for it, honestly. Yeah, interesting. The art style's fantastic. Other things that strike me about the game, it really is a testament to why, at least personally, why I think 2D is really where it's at in gaming. I think there are way too many 3D games that don't do enough artistically, visually. It's so expensive and it takes so much work, and it's so difficult to do good 3D. 3D animation's a skill that takes a lot of work, and 2D animation takes a lot of work too. But one or two people who are really good animators can do the work in 2D that it takes a team of 15 to do in 3D. Those are not exact numbers, and I think that makes a big difference. I do like that. Yeah, I like that the choice are morally ambiguous. I agree with you. It reminds me of The Witcher in that regard. I don't know if you've played The Witcher games, but The Witcher has a really nice, nuanced view of morality, and poses questions and poses problems for the player where there's not always a clear right answer, and the outcomes are not always clear. And they have branching endings. I want to say the first Witcher game had something like 13 different endings. And I think that that does feel more authentic to me than, Mass Effect, where it's not good and bad, it's Renegade and Paragon. But I think that that's fundamental to, the way that choice plays out in the game. I think it's in some ways fundamental to video games as a medium. The choice in video games is at a more fine-grained level than story. The most on-rails game you can possibly imagine, like something like a Call of Duty or whatever. Putting aside the fact that the story in those games is usually patently absurd and purposely over the top and is very Jerry Bruckheimer movie-ish. The choice is so fundamental to game mechanics, but it doesn't mesh well with storytelling in a lot of ways. Choose Your Own Adventure books are fun, but they also are kind of tacky. The real place where choice exists in a game like Call of Duty is really in the more skill-based part of, when do you attack? How do you address a certain problem? Are you going to try to fight head-on? Are you going to try to sneak around? Are you going to use a sniper rifle? What class are you going to be? Things like that. The choice at the level of tactics. And that is where I think Banner Saga, that's where I think Banner Saga as a game really shines, is in the tactical decision-making. I think the storytelling decision-making is good too, but, you can get frustrated because there's this lack of transparency at times. I'm struggling with, do I send this person after the carts when I don't know what the outcome's going to be? And in some ways that's reflective of real life, but at the same time in real life I have a lot more sensory input than just a couple sentences of text to make my decisions. I can actually see, does it look like if he tries to pull this cart up from falling over the cliff, is he going to fall? I can't make that assessment just from a sentence that says he's trying to pull it. Whereas the game does a really good job of giving you information about what's going to happen in the tactical battles, and it's a really rich and robust tactical battle system, even though it's fairly straightforward. I really like the system, the way they have the shield versus strength, because you want to take down the strength, but if you don't take down if you don't take down their strength, they can do more damage to you. But if you don't take down the shield first, it's really hard to do damage to their strength. I like the leveling up. You have to choose between a variety of different places to put your points. The core abilities are already selected, but you choose who you're leveling up first. who you're bringing into battle, what items to give to who, and then also how you want to allocate the points within the people who you are leveling up, because there's different strengths and weaknesses if you go more towards strength or more towards breaking armor or whatever, and you have to fight a balance between being balanced and min-maxing, and like that, I think that to me, that's where choice in games like this is really, really strong. It's the same thing in XCOM. It's the same thing in Expeditions Conquistador. Is a very similar game to this. I would say of all the games I've played in the last couple of years, actually this game is extremely reminiscent of Expeditions Conquistador in terms of the core mechanics. I actually think Conquistador does a better job at the level of the travel stuff and moving around and exploring. It's a more open world. This game has a better art style. I would say it's more atmospheric. It's certainly prettier. It has. Actually, I'm not going to say it has better music because Expeditions Conquistador has amazing music. But this one is beautiful, and it's 2D, whereas Expeditions is 3D. Or I guess you could call Expeditions 2.5D. It's kind of 3D without a free cam. Yeah. But, both of those games, and games like XCOM and whatever, there is so much player choice, and that's what makes them so fun and so engaging. When they can get frustrating is when that choice is really narrow, and it's like there is one optimal play style. I think the Banner Saga gives you the impression that there's an optimal play style, but I actually think that's not the case. I think no matter what you do, things are going to go wrong. And I think that's what was hard to get my head around as I started playing this game. But I think it's an actual strength, and I think that's hard for a lot of players, but I also want to say that is one of the real strengths of indie games as a space. I think a game like the Banner Saga can do something that even the new XCOM, to a degree, can't do. Because the new XCOM, there is an optimal play style. You have to build satellites first. You have to do certain things in certain orders, especially if you're playing on a higher difficulty level, in order to survive. You have to min-max, you have to optimize, and things, if you do it well, do not go wrong. I mean, things might go wrong. You still might have that 1 in 20 chance and somebody gets critical hit and died, but you put yourself in a position where your team as a whole is doing fine. I feel like the Banner Saga is willing and able to take a chance to put you as a player in a position where you feel like no matter what decision you make, things are going to go wrong. Somebody on your team is going to die. People from your caravan are going to die. You're going to run out of supplies. There's no way to play perfectly. There's no way to have the story unfold in such a way that at the end of this game you feel like, yes, we beat it. You don't beat this game. You experience the problem of you experience all of this problem solving and trying to balance your various competing needs, which I think is personally I find really exciting. I think not enough games do that. I think FTL does that. I think this game does that. I think Expeditions Conquistador does do that too, though you can play Expeditions Conquistador really well and basically dominate everything. I think King of Dragons Pass is a game that this also reminds me of in a lot of ways. I've talked about on the blog the other day. Man, there are so many people who contributed to this game on Kickstarter. Huge list of people. So yeah, I mean, some of those games that it reminds me of, they put you in that same kind of position. Like King of Dragons Pass is all about surviving. It's not about. I mean, there is a way to beat the game, but you're living by the skin of your teeth every turn. I guess what you would call a turn every season. And that's the way it is in this game, which like I said, I really like. I think there's a little polishing stability-wise. I'm just kind of giving a review at this point. I think there's a little polishing stability-wise. We had a few crashes. There could be a clearer sense sometimes of what your decisions are going to do. They don't need to tell you that somebody's going to die when you do something, but at the same time, I feel like I didn't have enough information to make certain decisions at certain points, and often in some games, it's not always clear if you're clicking on a dialogue option, if it's going to advance the dialogue forward, or if you're going to be able to go back to the other options, and something like that. I do think it is okay to let the player know when dialogue is final and when it isn't. That's something the Mass Effect games did really well with their wheel. As ridiculous as the Paragon Renegade stuff was in a certain way, it was nice to be able to say, okay, so all of the options around the circle are exploratory dialogue, where you can learn more, and then this one over here pushes the dialogue tree forward. And giving the player that control, I think, is nice. The lack of rewards is the opposite of high score, but more about your experience than a test of your skills. Yeah, exactly. This is not a game where you accumulate a high score. I mean, you could almost say, like, how many clansmen did you have left at the end is your score. But it really is about the experience and about the story. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that moves games more in an artistic direction in a lot of ways. I mean, high score games, like something like Super Hexagon, for example, which is about as high score, as non-narrative high score generating game as you can get. Certainly has its virtues, and it certainly is a work of art in its own way. But it's a very different kind of experience. You don't play that game for the story. You play it because it's pure skill, reaction time, vision, learning the skills of the game. I think my sense is that the Banner Saga is not. It's not even like a Dota or League of Legends, or it's not something where you try to hone your skill, or even XCOM, I think, where you try to hone your skill. It's a game where skill matters and tactics matter and strategy matters. Obviously, we had to fight that final battle 4 times before I figured out the right tactics. But I think that at the end of the day, it's more about being an engine for telling a story, and that's also why I really like. I mean, I've spent a lot of time on this stream so far in the early stages of this stream's existence playing Europa Universalis 4, and all of those Paradox games are really about, at the end of the day, being an engine for telling stories. I think they're not about taking over the world. They're not Rome Total War or Medieval Total War or whatever. They're not the Total War games. They're not, and they're not. They're not even Alpha Centauri or Civilization 5. There's not an endgame victory condition. There's instead an engine, a sandbox, in which you can tell the story of a nation, in the case of Europa Universalis 4, or the story of the Industrial Revolution and how it impacts the population of a nation in Victoria 2, or the story of a dynastic family and the politics involved in the case of Crusader Kings 2, or the story of World War II told differently if you play Hearts of Iron 3. So that kind of sandboxy feel, like, I don't think Banner Saga is quite a sandbox, but it's more of a sandbox than a lot of games like it, which I think is it's an impressive feat to pull off, balancing between telling a fairly narrow and railroaded story in a certain sense, but also having a kind of a sandbox for the color and flavor and feeling of that story to be very different depending on the decisions you make. And regardless, all of it in this fantastic atmosphere. I mean, it's such a beautiful game. I feel like I've said that over and over again, but it's just, the art style is so great. The animation is really nice. Even the tactical battles, like, you're doing a tactical battle system, but it's what tactical battle systems are. Tactical battle systems. It's people trying to kill each other, but it looks so attractive and it's so well designed. And I really think the art integrated well with the storytelling and integrated well even with the tactics system and with the level up system. Like, every screen felt in the right place, and the UI was really nice. Sometimes it was a little slow to load when you go from one screen to another, or sometimes it crashed, but that's those little niggly technical issues that I'm sure they'll work out now that they probably went from a QA team of 20, if that, because they're a small independent project, to now there's it's one of the top sellers on Steam, which means there's probably tens or hundreds of thousands of people who've bought it in the last few days. So they'll be able to fix a lot of bugs that they didn't fix before. But those little technical things, they're not a big deal. We had to reload a couple times. We lost a little progress a couple times, but and actually one time in particular was kind of frustrating because there was a battle we were about to win that we then had to reload and then got a different configuration and lost, and then stuck with the loss because that's what you do. But those things are minor. The core is really good, and that's why it excites me that there's more of these coming, that they're planning on doing a second and third installation of this story, because I think they've put it in a really good position, and they've done one of the things that Mass Effect did really well, which is give you a sense of accomplishment at the end of the first game by having a pretty serious boss, but like just like at the end of Mass Effect 1, like what you just fought is nothing compared to what's ahead of you. When you defeat Saren and when you defeat Bellower, you're like, that's nothing. There's a lot more. There's a lot more ahead of us. That big serpent there, those Reapers out there are a lot scarier than this one dude who it took everything you had to beat. And that kind of sense of the epic is, I think, really nice. And if there's one word that certainly fits for this game, even though it's only a 13, 14 hour long experience, it is an epic. It definitely gives you an epic sense of scale. The map is huge even if you don't explore all of it, which actually that's exciting too, because it means the next couple games I think we're going to explore that map more. There's so many characters. There's so many little interactions. I mean, we saw this interaction between two characters who were in our party that led to a betrayal and a big fight, and a bunch of people died. And who knows how many of these we didn't have because we didn't have certain people in our party, or because somebody died earlier in the game, or because whatever, because we managed to assuage certain people in certain ways. Because we let certain people in, it's possible that maybe we had somebody in our party who prevented something from happening like that. And who knows what all of those little trees are. Which makes the game, in some sense, replayable in a way that is kind of surprising. Like, you wouldn't naturally think that necessarily it's going to be that replayable because we know what the main story is. But yeah, there's so many little permutations we might find. And I wonder if you can keep separate saves. In fact, yeah, I know it keeps separate saves. So you could play this multiple times and then have multiple new saves at the end, which I'm sure they're going to have an import system of importing your save from the Banner Saga 1 into the Banner Saga 2, whatever the continuation of this story is. And, maybe it's as simple as Rook is dead and Alette is alive, or Alette is dead and Rook is alive. But there's a lot more there, too. I mean, maybe... Who knows? Maybe there's a way for Hakan to die or whatever. Now that's complicated from a game design perspective if you think about it. I'm still just reflecting, throwing some thoughts out there as we continue to see all of these people. Oh, hey, look, we can actually screen through them. It is complicated from a game design perspective when you think about it, because how do you, as a game designer, as a writer, deal with the possibility of these massive number of options? And I think that's part of the the Mass Effect end game problem, which the Mass Effect kind of is the core of the controversy of choice-based games, and then how do you end them? Because in Mass Effect 3, obviously the ending was very disappointing to a lot of people, because now your choices didn't matter. But the question is, across a trilogy of games, like what the Banner Saga is running into, how do you end a trilogy of games? I'm going to read this comment in a second. How do you end a trilogy of games in a way that honors the hundreds or thousands of choices that the player has made to get up to that ending? Because, if there's 1,000 choices and there's within each of those 1,000 choices, there's 3 different options, you're talking about literally trillions or more than trillions of possible configurations at the end of the game. Oh, that's interesting if your chats are getting eaten. I've heard some other people say that too. I don't know what's going on there. It could be that you're using banned words, but I think it would let you know if that was the case. I don't know what it is. Anyway, I'm going to read this. I would be very curious to see if you could come up with a game where after you defeat the final boss, you become the next final boss in a way and try to maintain your empire for as long as possible and prevent the next band of heroes from reaching you for as long as possible until you are overthrown by them. I sometimes get tired of the, but wait, there isn't something even more sinister than what you just defeated story. Yeah, I hear that. But what if you became the most sinister, conquered the realm, country? That's very interesting. That's an interesting idea. It's almost like New Game Plus, except instead of it repeating the old story, it's like now the end game, the goal is to defeat almost what you've created. I've certainly seen strategy games that do something that's not quite the same thing, but will take your designs of units, or will take things from what you've created or your party or whatever, and you have to fight against them. It's an interesting design space there. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Yeah, I agree that sometimes, but wait, the but wait, there's more is is kind of weird. Can be kind of weird. And actually, yeah, or maybe maybe I was reading that wrong. But wait, there isn't something even more sinister than what you just defeated. Yeah, so like for example, the end of Mass Effect 3, it's like I've heard that they're making a Mass Effect 4, and it's like, so where do you go from? You can't go anywhere. You've had your ridiculous Deus Ex Machina already. Certainly, you can't do Shepard anymore. Like Shepard is done. Especially because Shepard probably died unless you played their ridiculous multiplayer version. Which I have to say, that's a frustrating design decision, where it's like, you can only get the ending where Shepard lives if you play our multiplayer. I'm like, no. That's annoying. Anyway,